condición.
Good morning, teacher and classmates. My name is Margarita, and today I'm gonna present my final exam of grammar. So today I have the pleasure to speak about the second conditional sentences. What is the second conditional sentence? Well, the second conditional sentence is a structure used to describe imaginary or impossible situations. We have a lot to speak about the second conditional sentence. So let's get started with the component. On the second conditional sentences, we have two components, which are the if clause and the main clause, right? So also in the second conditional sentences, most of the time we start the sentences with the word if, but in some cases, people like to start the conditional sentences with the word when. But today, I'm gonna make emphasis on the if on the beginning of the second conditional sentences. So let's see here the grammatical order, okay? So in the grammatical order, we have if plus past simple plus would plus infinitive. That's the most common grammatical order to write a second conditional sentences. So on the second conditional sentences, also another important thing to talk is about the punctuation, right? So on the punctuation, we also we use a comma to separate both clauses. So when the if clause comes first, the sentence or the clauses are separated by a comma. But when the if clause comes on the second part of the sentence, there is not need to use a comma, right? So let's keep that in mind, because on the examples, I'm gonna explain more about that. So let's also see the ways to use the second conditional sentences, right? So we can use the second conditional sentences in many ways. Let's see some of the ways that we can use it. So we use the second conditional sentences to imagine that our life or someone else's life is different. We also use the second conditional sentence to give some advices, right? We also use the second conditional sentences to give reasons why you cannot do something. And also, we can use the second conditional sentences to ask hypothetical questions, right? So let's explain more about this on the examples. So let's move on to the examples here. I have here 4 examples. Let's talk about the punctuation first. On the first example, I have here, if dogs had wings, they would be able to fly. As you can see, this sentence starts with the word if, and we have a comma between the first clause and the second clause. You see? There is a comma, right? So, but in the second example, we have here, I will buy a big house if I had $1 million. As you can see, there is not a comma placed on the whole sentence. So why there is not a comma? There is not a comma because we don't start the sentence with the word if. So you can see the if is between the whole sentence. So there is not a comma neither. On the third example, we have if I were you, comma, I will drive more carefully. Let's read it again. If I were you, I will drive more carefully. So as you can see here, the sentence starts with the word if, and there is a comma between the between the first and the second clause. And then we have the last example. That is a question. So the example is, what will you do if you had magic powers? So as you can see, there is no comma, and there is something else. There is a punctuation mark. There is a question mark here. Don't forget that if you're asking a question, you always have to use a question mark at the end of the sentence. So in this case, there is no comma because the if is not on the beginning of the sentence. So let's keep that in mind always when you're writing a second conditional sentence, or when you are talking to, because you have to make the pause. You have to make the pause when there is a comma on the sentence, right? So let's talk about the ways of use and the examples, right? So remember, if dog had wings, they will be able to fly. That's something that's not true. I mean, that's an imagination. So that's what I said on the beginning, that we use this kind of sentence to describe imaginary situation. And also we have here, I would buy a big house if I had $1 million. That's something that it is not real right now. So it can be my life in the future, or it can be a future situation, an imagination of my life in the future. Also, the third example that it says, if I were you, I will drive more carefully. This third example is making emphasis on the part of where it says to give advices. Yes, we can give some advices to other people. Like this. If we see that the other person is driving like crazy, we can say, if I were you, I will drive more carefully. Right? So, on the fourth example, we have here, what will you do if you had magic powers? In this kind of examples, we are making emphasis on to ask hypothetical questions, right? We use hypothetical questions to make the conversation more interesting, more fun, and I like that kind of examples, because let's say that you ask somebody else, what will you do if you had $1 million? You know, so that's something that will make the other person be more interested about the conversation, right?
So basically, that's all about the second conditional sentences. I have explained you what is the second conditional sentences. I have gave you some ways to use it, and I also have gave you some example about that. So I hope you have enjoyed that video and you have learned a lot.